thank you all 4 of you for being here. 5, you count. You have to listen to it. This is Have It Your Way, Maximizing Drive-Thru Contributions. If you don't want to see this talk, you're in the wrong room. But let's just get started with some super fast introductions. You're not here to see me, really, you're here to get the content, but you get to learn about me anyway. I am VM Brasseur online everywhere, but because we're all friends here, please call me Vicky. Virtual machine jokes are not welcome. You can find me at VM Brasseur just about everywhere. My clicker is running low on battery, so this is going to be fun. So VM Brasseur just about everywhere. Twitter, IRC. I am a senior software engineering manager working at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I work in service to a team which is 100% dedicated to upstream open source development. That is exactly as wonderful as you think it is. So thank you, Hewlett-Packard, for loving open source and for letting me be here today. During this talk, I'm going to cover some definitions of what I mean by drive-thru. That will set some context for the rest of the talk. I will tell you some disadvantages of drive-thru because equal time. I will spend a fair bit more time on the advantages of drive-thru contributors, why you should give a damn about them. Then I will tell you a lot about how to maximize drive-thru contributors and contributions for your project. What I will not cover, and if you're here to learn this and I'm sorry, wrong talk. I will not cover how to convert a drive-thru into a repeating contributor and or community member. This is a really big subject, and you just can't cover it all in one talk unless this were like a 3-hour deal, and it's not. So despite that, a lot of the things I will cover in here can be applied to turn people into repeating contributors, and they help a lot. So let's set some more context here, some definitions. There are a lot of ways to contribute to open source projects. Not all of them are code. Not all of them are documentation. There are things like project management, bug triage. You know, these are really important things. Community management, organizing meetups. I'm not going to be talking about those today. Today I'm only limiting to things that can be committed to source control. Contributor, naturally anyone who commits to source control, makes their work available. Then a drive-thru committer, a drive-thru contributor, is someone who shows up, gives you one contribution, and then bugs out and you never see them again. These are the people we're really concerned about right now and are the subject of this talk. So let's start about talking, I'll tell you some about the characteristics of both drive-thru contributions and the people who make them. I ran a little Twitter survey. I asked people about their experiences with drive-thru contributors and contributions. What follows through the rest of this talk springs from that and from my own personal experience. First of all, it's easiest to describe the characteristics of contributions rather than contributors, so I'll start there and get it out of the way. There are a lot of possible characteristics for a contribution, but for drive-thrus, they almost always fall into one of these 5 categories. Self-service, somebody has to fix something, they show up, they fix it, they get out. It's work-related. They have to fix a thing with a library in order to do their job. Got a special project or use case. Let's say you are that VAX hobbyist, and you really need something to work on VAX, but the project isn't going to do it themselves, so you show up, you make it work on VAX, you get out. You find a bug, just happen to stumble across it, you fix it, you leave. And then a lot of them are documentation addition and fixes because we're all pedants and we hate seeing typos. So that was easy. But contributors are considerably harder because contributors are people, and people are complex creatures. So why do drive-thru contributors show up at all? Most commonly, it's because they're scratching an itch. We've all done this. We've got a bug we need fixed. It's just driving us nuts. We show up, we fix it, we get out. We don't want to have anything to do with the community. We just want to solve our problem and move on, right? So this is most common from my research and my experience. Other times, they show up because they really don't have any option. They can't go anywhere else. Your project is the only one that does what they need, just doesn't do it exactly how they need, so they show up and they make a fix. Other times, they have no alternative because they inherited it. This happens a lot at work when you get a new job or when you get moved on to a new project. Suddenly you have to work with new open source libraries, with new open source tools. You don't like it because you didn't choose them. The way you do it is so much better, but you have to use this, so fine, I'll make a contribution and move on. Then there are the ones who really, really like you. They love your project. They really want to contribute. They want to do anything possible to help you, but they just don't have the time. So they show up, they make at least one small contribution so they can see their name, contributors file in that repo, and they're like, yeah, I did something. I made a difference for something I really care about. And then they leave because life, right? Which leads us into that question, why do they leave? There's a lot more information out there, surprisingly, about why they leave than why they show up. The most obvious one, they scratch their itch. They fix that bug. They're done. They don't need to involve themselves anymore. They've got exactly what they have, and now they're moving on. No time, because OMG life. You've got kids, you've got dogs, you've got life, you've got work, you've got other hobbies, you have problems. You just can't do this. So people will show up, make one contribution, have every intention of making more, and then just can't. Also, sometimes people show up, they make one contribution, and they learn how hard it is to make a contribution on your project, how many hours and days and weeks they have to wait for that bloody thing to merge. They're like, well, that's not a good return on my investment. I'm going to leave. So they test the waters, they find out it's hard, they get out. Sometimes they leave because they just stop using the project. Maybe they change jobs. Maybe they just have completely different needs. They no longer do VAX. Now they've moved on to Amiga, for instance. Sometimes they leave your project because it's just too much overhead to use your project, and they've switched to something with a better user experience. Or they found something with more appealing features that they can use. So they just leave. They've made one contribution. Maybe they would have made more, but meh. Why would they? They're not using your project anymore. These are going in increasing order of severity, really. It's difficult to contribute to your project. Your process is really convoluted. Usually it's not documented worth a damn. What little communication there is really crappy. Just takes too much time and effort for them to do anything. And it's just a huge investment in time. So they show up, they do one, then like, nope, all the notes, and they nope to push .gif right out of your project. Sometimes they show up and they make a contribution, and then they get no thanks at all. Zero. They hear nothing. They make a contribution, and then they are expecting a thanks. They expect you to at least put them in a contributors file. You know, they expect you to not ignore their stuff. They expect you to talk to them, and you don't. And that's really demoralizing, and it's not friendly. So people leave. Can you blame them? I would. Then there's the worst thing, assholes. You and your project harbor assholes and assholery. Rudeness and dismissive comments, they drive people away. Some of the respondents to my survey said that core contributors took credit for their work. Not only did they not get gratitude, but somebody stole their shit, man. That's not cool, right? That's assholery. Other people said that they left because they couldn't stand the snark club. It was nothing but backbiting and fighting and just demeaning comments. And so they left. This is far, far too common. So some of the people who are assholes, some of the people who are rude and dismissive to DriveThru contributors say they do it because there are a lot of disadvantages to DriveThru contributors, and they just hate when they do that. They hate these people. So therefore, I can be rude to them, right? It's very dehumanizing. So I don't agree with these people. I don't agree with their behavior of rudeness, but it is fair to make sure I get some of their points out there. They weren't able to give me a lot of details, mostly just I hate these people. But when I was able to get some details about why, I felt it's fair to share it. First of all, it takes time. OMG, I spent all this time helping this person and spoon feeding them and getting them through our incredibly convoluted and terrible process, and then they just left, and that was just a waste of time. Well, okay, first of all, you got their contribution, so that's something. But also, it's not a waste of time, right? These are people who want to give you their time, their effort, their code, their thoughts. But they believe it's a waste of time. Cool, that's their prerogative. But they do dismiss DriveThru contributors because of this. The biggest one I heard over and over again, though, is these people are not community. They're just showing up, they're giving us their code for free, and then they're leaving, and they're not being a part of the community, and that somehow is offensive to them. So here's what happens when a girl buys an iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil. She starts to think she can draw. So there are only really 2 images in here, and they're about to be in these 2 slides. So these are people who, this is their values. They value community. God, my pointer doesn't work and it's driving me nuts. They value community above all else in their project. And then they will value the contributors, and then at the top, very important still, but the core contributors are less important than the community as a whole. And this is their value pyramid, and that's fine. I'm a huge fan of community. I write about community a lot, I speak about community a lot, and I build community a lot. So, yay, go community, woo. But this is what it really ought to be. You cannot have community until you have contributors. There will be nobody to make a community of, and I just ended a sentence with a preposition, and it drives me nuts. So there will be nobody to build that community if you don't have contributors. So why are you dissing contributors of any sort? Community relies upon contributors. It is the foundation upon which all of your project is built. I don't care if you have a project of 1 or a project of 1,000. Contributors are what you need to build community. So, I'm sorry, could we please save questions for the end? I should have said that, I normally do it.
I was walked in a little bit late, so sorry.
Pardon?
I walked in a little bit late.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, you need contributors before you can start building community. So, I'm going to make just a modest little proposal here. And that is, rather than dissing DriveThru contributors, we should use an ever-increasing number of DriveThru contributors in your project as a sign of a healthy project. And that if a project does not have a lot of DriveThru contributors, it might not be healthy. So this can act as an incredibly valuable metric for gauging project health. If you get more DriveThru contributors, you know what that means. It means that more people are looking at your project. More people are using your project. Your contribution is more accessible. Your process is more accessible and easier. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother to do it. More people are therefore able to contribute to your project. And those are potential people who you could eventually turn into community members. These are signs of a healthy project. So there are a lot of advantages, as you're probably guessing, to having DriveThru contributions and contributors. Let's try and get to some of the advantages of maximizing those in your project. Trying to find more, trying to make it easier for people to contribute and get a higher number of DriveThru contributors. Number 1, if you're doing this, you will have an improved process. It will be clear, open, direct, and unambiguous. Otherwise, people would be unable to become quick and easy DriveThru contributors. Right? You would not get increased numbers if this weren't the case. You also have better communication routes. Also, open, clear, direct, unambiguous. If you have a lot of DriveThru contributors, you must have this, because otherwise it's difficult, again, and they're not going to stick around. They're not going to contribute at all. You have improved numbers. This one's pretty obvious. You have more contributors in total. You therefore have more contributions in total. This can lead to a faster time to merge because you have a different and better process, right? Once you have more DriveThrus, more contributors, better process, then this leads to a faster time to release. This is all good. Better numbers all around if you have more DriveThru contributors. You also end up with a higher quality project because of the processes you've set in place. Linus has famously said, and it gets quoted all the time, With enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. I'm sorry, what do you think your drive-thru contributors are bringing you? They're bringing you a lot more eyes. They're spotting more bugs, they're fixing more bugs. Does it matter that they leave afterward? Because you still have a bug fix, and that's one fewer bug in your project. They also add more test coverage. They add more documentation coverage. They might leave afterward, but you still have these things. They also can bring a healthier project culture because they're not going to stick around if your culture sucks. In order to foster more drive-thru contributors, your project should become more welcoming, helpful, friendly, and have minimum blame, which means minimum ego, which gets back to the no asshole thing that I was talking about earlier. Therefore, with all of these things, your project gets a better reputation. If it gets a better reputation, it's seen as more friendly and more accessible, and more people are going to use it and come by to begin with. And that community that you value so highly is going to start to grow because they like you. This becomes this beneficial cycle that you keep getting more drive-thru contributors and more community members and more drive-thru community contributors and more community members. And so drive-thrus can help foster a lot of this. They're not just a time sink, they're really valuable. They lead to a healthier project overall because the actions you take to just focus on and maximize drive-thrus and measure those as a metric will lead to a healthier project overall. So let's talk really, really briefly about project health. Super fast here. How many of you in this room run or have run an open source project? Okay, of the ones with your hands up, how many of you do any sort of measurement or metrics on project health? Okay, much better than I was expecting, higher percentage. So you probably already know a little bit about this, but some of the ways you can measure project health, there are enormous numbers of ways you can do this, and it will vary based upon project and how they define health, are going to be the number of download stars and forks. That's the one a lot of people look at, it, particularly if it's a corporately sponsored project. They really care about download stars and forks. Number of contributors and contributions, those are relatively easy to get. Just grab those from your source control system. Number of issues opened and closed. This is underrated. If you're getting a lot of issues open, guess what it means? Somebody's using your project, and how cool is that? And closing means legitimately closing, not will not fix. The number of patches and PRs not only submitted, but accepted. Because I don't know about you, I get PRs on my projects that just kind of languish for a while because I'm a big doofus who isn't doing the right thing. Then there's also your average and median contributor age. And age can be defined as is best for your project. It could be the first time you see them on a mailing list, the first time they show up in your chat room, the first time they open an issue, to the last time you see them, right? It could be whatever makes most sense for you. Is anyone going to OSCON and or the Community Leadership Summit in Austin? Deb and I raised our hands, we're the only ones going. So at the Community Leadership Summit, there is also the Floss Community Metrics Summit. And they've got a lot of stuff online. If you're interested in measuring the health and learning more about the health of your project, please check out flosscommunitymetrics.org. I think it's only the second, maybe third year for it. Deb, do you know?
Second, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I've
it's-
been doing it before FASTM for a couple of years now.
Okay, yeah.
Based in Spain.
There's a lot of really great resources here if you're interested in learning more about community health, about project health. So, water. I keep telling you how great these people are, and OMG, you should maximize to get more of them. And you may be wondering, how in the hell do I do that? And don't worry, I can tell you. So maximizing, methods for maximizing drive-thru contributions. How do you do this? How do you get more people? Well, first of all, you should probably start before doing any of this, take a benchmark. We all know how to do monitoring. We all know how to do benchmarking. So take a benchmark. How many drive-thru contributors do you have today? Figure it out. And then start implementing some changes and see whether they help. This is iterative development. We know how this is done. Change one thing, see what it affects. Change another thing, see what it affects. But you have to keep doing those numbers and those metrics in order to do it. So our iterative development is going to start with one of my favoriteest things in the world for projects, and that is documentation. The best way to maximize contributions is to make it easy for people to contribute. Okay, the best way to do that is to document, document, document. Documentation gives your project superpowers. Okay, it is a force multiplier of the knowledge already contained within the heads of the community members of your project. Doesn't do anyone any good if that knowledge stays in their heads. You can't maximize drive-through contributions if the people who have the answers aren't around. So documentation will increase the number of contributions overall. It will improve the quality of those contributions, and even better, if you care about your community a lot, doc the shit out of everything, because this is going to save a lot of their time. People aren't going to be coming into the IRC channel poking them for what seem like basic questions. Doc it. How should you doc it? What should you doc? Everything. Hey, it not only will save time by minimizing questions, but it helps to standardize processes, which is really very helpful because everyone's not doing things a different way. Sorry, I can't do it. You're working with Joe, and Joe uses Emacs, and he's got some special bindings, and I can't, No, try and standardize. Not that I'm saying standardize on Emacs or VI. We're not getting into religious discussions here today. That was just the first example that jumped into my head. Okay, so what should you document? How to contribute. This is just so easy, but nobody does it. And I'm not talking, check out the code, edit the code, push the code. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, make sure you've got documentation, make sure you have tests. Here are standards around this, here are standards around that. Be very, very explicit about what you expect when you receive a contribution. Do you want people to ping you on IRC afterward? If not, say, we will look at it in this amount of time. Please do not bother us. Rest assured we have seen your, but make it explicit. Checklists are awesome for this, particularly for drive-thrus who are not going to come back again. They can make sure that they are getting you the highest quality and the best practices for your particular project. Checklists will do that. They're cool. Plus, if you use GitHub, you can use the little actual checklist things in your GitHub flavored Markdown. Another thing to do is kind of a great big start here sign. Most people, if they have a bug, they know it already and they just want to learn how to contribute. So you give them a how to contribute because that's great, and then you standardize your contributions. But a great big start here sign is also useful for people who just don't know. They might just want to contribute because, again, those are the people who love you. They like you, they really like you, and they just want to make some difference. Give them a quick start guide. Give them a start here guide. This can have links to everything, including how to contribute. This is pretty obvious. It's also easy to make. So just do it. Make it nice and easy to find as well. Another thing to do, document your communication routes, or routes, depending upon whence you hail. Document, so have we all seen drive-through contributors in our projects, by the way? Or just new contributors in general? Have you noticed that a large percentage of the questions that you see either on the mailing list or the chat room start with, whom do I ask about? Right? Why don't we just document that stuff? This is the person to contact for this, and this is how. Here are all the ways we communicate. If you do mailing lists, do that. If you do have a chat room, do that. If you do both, tell people what to use in which case. If you use none of them and you only want to track everything on their issue tracker, and I know some projects that do this, say that up front, you really minimize this stress for people, and you maximize the opportunity for them to come in, make their change, and hope potentially get out. Another thing I've seen some projects do, if they're particularly large and they have a lot of chatter on their main communication routes, is to have a dedicated communication route just for new contributors. And this not only allows you to minimize the noise in the other channels, but it gives you a place where new contributors can help each other. And you can set up office hours for your core contributors and the other community members. This time on Tuesdays, you're manning the room. This time on Saturdays you're manning the room and people kind of pick whatever works for them. And that saves everyone else's time because you don't have to have the entire core team sitting in your new contributors room. You can only have 1 or 2 people at a time helping out the new contributors. And then your core people can focus. They don't have to get interrupted. So that's pretty cool. All right, people flinch when I throw this one up. I'm sorry, but you have jerks in your community. You may not know it, but you do. If you think you don't need a code of conduct because this shit never happens in your community, you just aren't seeing it, it's not being reported, it happens. And if it isn't happening, then there's no harm in having one anyway. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of benefit in it because it shows new contributors, drive-thru or otherwise, that you give a damn about their safety and how comfortable they are in your community. Right? So this is really important. Just have one. There are lots of really good ones out there that you can crib. There are plenty of them out there that are Creative Commons, so you can just take them legally rather than just plagiarizing somebody's hard work. But you should do this, right? And it should have all of these elements in it. What is expected behavior? What's unacceptable behavior? What are the consequences? It's very important to tell people what the consequences are. Because if they ever ask, or what, you have failed. And they're just going to do stuff anyway. Methods for reporting should be very clear, and you should tell people whether it's anonymous or not. Also tell people how decisions are made. Because sometimes it might not be something they're comfortable with if they do have to make a report. But tell them up front so they can make an informed decision. Project governance. Some of these things make more sense on larger projects. My entire team, most of my team, works on OpenStack. The rest works on Python, really big projects. So it makes sense to have something like this regardless. It could just be a tiny little thing in a README, but having the information out there for people is really helpful. Who is who are the project leaders, who are the core contributors, subject matter experts, are there sub-teams? Get this stuff out there up front, and then people won't necessarily have to ask. You get a lot of unnecessary and confused questions sometimes. Also, you'll get those arrogant newbies who will show up and completely rip someone on the mailing list and then find out that it's like Guido or something. And they just don't know who this person is, right? Because nobody bothered to tell them and they're new to the project and the community. So they don't know that we just ripped God a new asshole. That's not cool, regardless of who it is. But in particular, you don't do it to the core leaders. All right, more on project governance. Other things, what are the rules and processes? If you are a large enough project that you do have rules and processes for elections, for instance, that's really important. Document this. If you're this large, you probably already have it documented anyway because you're part of a foundation and you've got bylaws and blah, 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 blah. Another thing that isn't documented very often is how to become core. And this can be really inspirational for people. They see, oh, this is a target. I can hit that. This is really cool. Maybe I can do that. And it can be inspirational for people to try to become core. Also, this is leveling the playing field for the cores. Everybody knows what to expect of a core. You must be this high to ride this ride. I'm taller than that, I must be core. It also will remove biases later on with your project. If it's written out in, black and white or whatever you have your monitor set to, this is what a core looks like. Then when it comes time to select cores, anyone who meets that should be made core. And if they're not, there might be some biases in your project and your community that you want to look into. Another thing not quite as important but is helpful is to have a project roadmap. What this can do for drive-thrus in particular is they give you their new feature and they're like, OMG, now you're going to put it in the release and it's going to be so cool. And you say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. Here is our documented process. Here is our documented roadmap. Let us discuss and negotiate where we can get this in. We have a process, you're going to break it, we can't do that, but let's work with that. And if they see that you've got a process, they might not come to knocking on your door going, why didn't you put this in the next release? Well, I'm sorry, but, and then you just go on and on and on. So the next two are nice to have and not as useful. Well, they are useful for drive-thrus, but they're more to make people feel comfortable as a drive-thru and make it more likely for them to come back. Oh my God. Is there anything really more unhelpful and exclusionist than sitting in a room and having everyone speak a language you don't speak and then laughing at jokes you don't understand? Why would I come back to your community if I don't understand what's going on? We all have jargon, docket. We all have acronyms, docket. This is the biggest problem in a huge corporation I have learned, HPE. Holy crap, the acronyms and abbreviations. People don't speak in real full words at HPE. It's really weird. But we've got a lot of acronyms and abbreviations to the point that our search tool on our intranet homepage, the very first thing it searches is a database of acronyms and abbreviations. You can just type it in, right? What is HOS? Well, it's Helium OpenStack. Now I've got that. Inside jokes as well. These, a lot of people don't want to document because then you set up this us versus them. You're not a member of our community if you don't get our joke. And you would get our jokes if we documented them. We can't do that. We have to have a gating thing here. So we know who is us and who is them. But if you document it, you know what you've done? You've just made that person one of us, and you've grown your community, right? And plus, it's super fun to go back and read these sometime when you're having a bad day. I used to do this at a company I worked at a while back, and they had a culture file. And, you know, like once a year, I'd just sit back and go, nope, it's Friday. My last buck has flown out the window. I am going to sit around and read the culture file. And it's really fun. So document that. And then document error messages. Please, document error messages. This one isn't even hard, for crying out loud. Every time you hit an error message, put it in the doc and start getting all your other community members to do it as well. And you can easily and quickly build this up very fast. And this is going to reduce the questions that drive-thrus have. They're going to be able to go to this error file and go, oh, that's my problem. I don't have to bother anyone. I can very quickly now solve my problem, make my patch, and get it to you so I can move on with my life. But if they have to do this, and then they go to Stack Overflow, and that way lies madness. So you just don't want to do that. So there are a ton of other things that you can naturally document. This is just kind of scraping the tip of the iceberg. We're going to move on because there are other things you can do. Like mentoring, yay! Slides get really excited now. They all like end in exclamation points, yay! Mentoring is super helpful. There's lots of different ways you can mentor. It really depends upon your particular project. Code review is super helpful. It's great. It's a lot easier to do with GitHub PRs now. You can have a nice conversation back and forth. In OpenStack, we use Garrett for this and do a lot of back and forth conversation with people. And this is really great. You can build up great relationships here. You can help guide people towards documentation for things. You can help correct problems before it gets merged. You fix bugs. You find semicolons that somebody left off, closed left brackets and everything, typos. So code review is great. And it allows you to build up a relationship with this drive-thru contributor. If they have a relationship, they're less likely to move on, and their patch is going to be better. Office hours. This is something nobody does, and I regret this, and I think it really should happen. Just post somewhere on your mailing list, or more likely someplace static, like on your README somewhere. Our office hours are X to X, X to X, X to X in this time zone. Please specify time zone. And then during that time, the community and or core contributors are available. You can even set names. These people, this team is available from 2 to 4 on Wednesdays, on Pacific Standard Time. Use UTC even, I don't care. But do that, and that's going to help people show up, get their questions answered, and then move on very quickly. And you're not going to have quite as many interruptions as you would otherwise, which means you have a lot less frustration. And again, that's something that people get annoyed with drive-thru contributors is there's interruptions, you're sucking up a lot of people's time. Well, it's your time. Define how it's used. Set office hours. You can also do hackfests. These don't have to be anything really, huge. Just something out to the mailing list or on Twitter. Hey, hackfest on LibreOffice at this cafe in Baltimore. Everyone who wants, show up. New contributors, encourage. We're going to help you. Everyone else, just pick a bug of your choice and we're going to work on stuff. Super easy. You can do that in 5 minutes. I'd call the cafe first to make sure they have space. And then there are special new contributor events. These are people who are most likely only going to be drive-thrus. You might get, 10, 15 people coming by, and they all get one patch, one bug that they have fixed, and then you might retain 1 or 2 of them. But you still have 10 or 15 patches and 10 or 15 bugs that are fixed out of 1 afternoon of work for a new contributor event. And you've taught them how to use your process, and you've shown them you give a damn, so they're more likely to come back and do it again. So new contributor events are really neat. There are also some process improvements you can do. We all have processes, whether we like to admit it or not. As new bugs come in, if it's easy enough, and by easy enough, I don't mean by I know every character of this code like the back of my hand determination, but legitimately easy enough for a new person. Tag them. It makes it, for those folks who really, really love your project and want to contribute but don't have time, and so they do one and then they leave, if they know an easier place, maybe if they have a free afternoon on a weekend because, the kids are at grandma's or something, they might want to do this because they love you. And this will make it easier. Have a contributor SLA of some variety. Could just be a quick statement of, in your contributor doc, how to contribute. If you give us new patches, we promise to do our damnedest to get back to it in 3 days. Say that up front. That way, not only does it light a fire under your ass to actually do it, because you've kind of got some skin in this game now, but it also means they're less likely to send a patch and then immediately run into your chat room and say, hey, I sent a patch. Kind of like those people who send you an email and then walk over to your desk and say, hey, did you get my email? Like, you know what? I'm in the middle of something right now. I'll get to it when I have time. This allows you to get to it when you have time, and you're setting up expectations appropriately with people so they won't disturb you. It also means you have to live up to this because otherwise you're going to piss people off and they'll never come back. And if this turns out to not work, I'm sorry, it's your documentation. You can change it. If 3 days doesn't work for you, change it to 5. Send a list to the mailing list, a message to the mailing list saying, hey, change of expectations. Here is why. It's cool. People will understand. Also, Docker. You want to hear all about Docker and how it sucks, by the way, go to see Corey's talk after this. And that will be incredibly entertaining, informative. You should go. It's so easy to make a container, to make a VM image now. Why don't we do this with our dev environments? Why don't we provide these? You do have to maintain them and keep them up to date and make sure they've got the latest and greatest of what you are using for production or what you expect people to use for production or what have you. This makes it so easy for someone to come in, grab that, put it on their machine, get up and going in like an hour depending upon download speeds, right? And then they can fix their bug and they can get you their contribution and they can move on with their life. Otherwise, they've got a day and a half of fuckery trying to get your bloody dev stack to work. Why? No, just give them an image. It's easy. It'll take you half a day and it'll save them so much time. Other things you can change are considerably harder because people are squishy little things. Culture is one of them. So this is where, as a core contributor, as community members, as organizers, as leaders, we have to lead by example. And we have to tell other people gently and with empathy if they do something wrong. If they are not valuing contributors. You have to build a culture of documentation. You have to do that not by asking someone else to do the docs, not by opening up a bug for someone else to do the docs, but for you to do the docs. Lead by example. And talk to your team, talk to the core members, talk to the community, and tell them this is what we value and why. And let's do this. Let's make it easier and more welcoming for people to show up. Default to assistance. Don't default to rolling your eyes and sighing when someone comes asking for questions. Okay? Helping others should not be seen as a distraction. Typo. It should be seen as the reason why you're there, particularly as core members, particularly as a community. If you're not helping others, then you're just there for yourself. And that's not a community, that's a bunch of people sitting around using the same code. You can relinquish control. You can get the hell over yourself and allow other people to be core. You can allow other people to +1 things to get them merged in. You just have to set up parameters up front and let people know all the expectations and how to do that, right? It's not that hard. Make it easier to become core. You've potentially docked it already, right? So that makes it easier for people to become core. It doesn't become this woo, mysterious bunch of people in dark hooded things, you know. No, they know how it's done. We're in open source and free software, for crying out loud. We believe in openness. Why do we hide that shit behind closed walls? We should fix that. And and finally, we've got the no asshole rule. Institute a no asshole rule for your entire project. We all have a project with that person, right? We all either are a member of or we know of a project with that person. More likely, we are a member of it because that person exists everywhere. And that person says rude and dismissive things. That person belittles others. That person rips others a new asshole on the mailing list. But it's okay because, you know, that person will be that person. Every project has assholes because every project tolerates assholes. We can fix that. However, as we institute the no asshole rule, it is very important that we not become the assholes ourselves. When you need to talk to somebody about their assholery, please be empathetic about it. Use empathy. Don't use the same methods that your asshole is using, because then you're being a jerk too, so why should not? No, I mean, there are ways to learn how to talk to people in this way. There's a book, Crucial Conversations. You can read that. I actually didn't like it that much, but everybody else loves it, so everybody else must be right. I am the outlier here. That's great. I'm okay with that because it's still a good book that teaches you valuable things. But read up on how to have these difficult conversations with people, because that's the way you get rid of assholes. You also have to call them out in public with empathy and say, I'm sorry, but we don't accept that behavior. We don't accept that speech around here. Here is our code of conduct. You have violated it. We are doing something about it. Let's fix this. If you have assholes in your project, I guarantee people aren't going to want to stick around unless they're assholes. Right, another thing you can do here is outreach. This is part of the culture change you can do, and this is involved with increasing communication. How about you say thank you from time to time? When somebody drops by and they give you a patch, I don't care if it's a 1-letter fix in a doc. Express gratitude. You can do it on that PR. You can do it on the patch email and just say, thank you for this. I appreciate the time you took. That's all. 10 seconds, bam, you've expressed gratitude and you've made somebody know that you give a damn. That's huge. That's a huge return on investment. Do contributor recognition of some variety. If you do releases, make sure you call out people. These are the people who contributed directly to this release. Yay, go team. Doesn't take much time. There are scripts that will generate these lists for you. Very easy. If you're a project that has funding, you can send them all like a little patch or something. I don't know. Whatever you think, but some sort of recognition. And that will, when people see on the outside Drive-Thru, it's like, oh, you've got 5 patches, and like literal patches. That's kind of cool. Maybe I want to come back and like get a patch for a patch. See, that helps people want to come back. And then follow up with people. Whether they're a new contributor, an old contributor, Drive-Thru contributor, you actually don't recognize Drive-Thru contributors until they don't return. But follow up with them regardless. How was your experience? Is there anything we can do to make it easier for you to contribute? You don't have to use all of their ideas, but people like to be asked to the dance. They don't have to dance. So just ask them. Ask for feedback. How can the process improve? If they are a Drive-Thru contributor, once a quarter, once a year, something like that, when you finally determine that this is a Drive-Thru, go back and say, hey, why did you leave? Start collecting statistics on that, and you might learn some really surprising things about your project and your community. But you can't do that if you don't take the time to talk to them. So hey, super quick recap. You know what that means? We're nearing the end. Contributions. We all went through this already. Really, this is just the slides for after the fact when I put them on the archive, which, by the way, I've already done. URL will be available. So your contributions are usually work-related, special case, yay, vax, bug, doc fix, yay, doc fixes. Contributors scratch their itch and then they leave. They don't have time for more, but they think you're really, really swell. It's harder than hell to contribute to your project. Open stack. They don't feel appreciated, and your project harbors assholes. And apparently I wrote this on my iPad, which is set to Australia, so I have an errant U in there. All right. Advantages of maximizing the drive-through contributors. Means you have a clear and open process, you have communication clear and open, you will end up with more contributors and therefore more contributions, yay. Because you're doing the right thing, you will also have higher code quality and docs and better test coverage as well. Let us not forget that because that's really valuable. Faster time to release because you've got higher quality and more people working on it, and you're gonna have a more welcoming culture. And there's that beneficial cycle that happens. More drive-throughs, healthier project. Period.end. I'm gonna stamp my little princess foot and stand by that. Methods, documentation is your superpower for your project. Set up a culture and a schedule for mentoring. Why am I reading the slides? You all are very literate. And now I'm going to eat my own dog food, which is I'm going to give gratitude for some of the people, as many as I could find, who helped me on this. First of all are some of the survey respondents. These people all took, some of them, a large amount of time to have a long dialogue with me about projects they've run, projects they've been members of, all of them. So thank you to all of these people. I had two people, full disclosure, I was editing these slides at 12:45 today, and yet I still had time to have two people review them for me. My friends Gene Hack and Chris reviewed them for me and both gave me some really great feedback. Gene Hack actually reviewed my mind map in advance, which was just above and beyond the Call of Duty because it was a little chaotic. So thank you. For brainstorming for this talk, my friend Steve and I have amazing conversations. He's a brilliant human being, and we came up with some really great ideas. So yay, Steve. And then the hashers are always incredibly useful to me, and I love them dearly. And then there's the pub. All of this was written pretty much at my pub, and I can't get anything done without this place. My best writing happens at County Cork. And of course, there's this conference for allowing me to give you this awesome presentation. And the slides are available right now. Don't ask me this question. Of course they're available. Where else but into the archive? Because yes, we can save that. I am not currently at the archive, but I did used to work there, and I still love them and their mission. So there's that. And I encourage you to please join the eval empire. There are evaluations for all talks. If you go to the talk page here, you can find a form soon after, I think it's like 2 hours or something after this talk, or it's available soon. So please, this is the very first time I have given this talk. I will be giving it at least 4 and probably 6 times this year. I do a lot of conferences. So your feedback is going to be absolutely invaluable to me. I want it positive, I want it negative, but don't just give me like a 1 star and don't give me any comments because I can't improve that way. And with that, we have approximately we have 9 minutes?
Yeah,
9 minutes left, so we have time for questions or hopefully not comments concealed as questions. Yes?
Can you go back at one slide so I can get that other URL?
Yes.
Thank you.
What was your name?
I'm Kurt.
Well, hi, Kurt.
Hi.
Appropriately short. Yes, sir, what's your name?
Christian.
Christian, hi.
So what do you recommend as far as consequences for working with people that exhibit the assholery you were talking about?
So the question is, what do I recommend for consequences for people exhibiting assholery? Well, a lot depends upon your project and what it accepts and what it does not accept and how it behaves and how it does not behave. Cultures are different. It depends a lot upon the person as well. Bottom line is you can kick people out. You can empathetically show them the door. That is a consequence. If they just say something that has made somebody feel uncomfortable, then you pull them aside and you say, hey, you said this, and this is why it was bad. Do you understand? Okay, next time it happens, we will have to ban you from the mailing list for a week. We will have to kick ban you from IRC for a bit. We will have to pull your commitment. We will have to, it really depends upon your project and what its particular avenues are. But there has to be some way to, if they're doing something that is toxic and bad to the entire community, you have to find a way to separate them from the community if they are unwilling to stop. Because otherwise it is toxic, and it's called toxic for a reason, right? You've got to get people away from that virulent thing, and that is usually by removing the virulence. It's difficult, and they literally write entire books about this, so I don't think I'll be able to answer it all. Do you have a specific case in mind? If so, we can discuss it after the fact. I don't want to get it on camera.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring up a specific case, but to follow up, do you find that in presenting an actual consequence, a consequence that would mean something, in an open source project, that since people are giving their free time towards the project, that tends to cause them to, even if this isn't a consequence, but just to leave the project more normally than not? Or have you found a good middle ground between a meaningful consequence and not ending up with people that are just leaving from a minor consequence?
Oh, I don't even know how to summarize that for the audio. So follow-up question is, crikey, this is an interesting task. How to set the consequences appropriately based upon the problem that they're having, and how to make sure they're leaving for the right reasons if they leave. Because often people who face consequences will just leave your project. Are they leaving because of a really big problem that they are given big consequences for, or are they leaving because of a little consequence? Is that it?
Yeah, especially since people in those types of positions, since they have an attitude that deserves some sort of a consequence, those folks would probably be more likely to just jump ship because of the kind of person that they are.
And, okay, so they might jump ship if they have any consequences whatsoever, no matter the size. And my glib answer to that is, so what? They've left. And that's unfortunate, but the community will make do. It will fill in the hole, even if they are that, legendary unicorn rock star 10x developer. I don't care, because they're dragging the entire community down. So if they leave over some tiny little thing, did you really want to work with them anyway? Because holy diva, Batman. So a lot of it will also stem upon how you communicate the consequences. If you just sort of go, look, you can't do this anymore. They're going to dig in their heels, and they're going to fight you, and you're going to fight back, and then they're going to take their ball and go home. And while the benefit of taking the ball and go home might be a net win for the community, you being a jerk to them is not. So this is why you have to learn how to have these conversations with people. How you do it is at least as important as what you do it. I believe Deb has a question, so we can talk about this more afterwards if you need.
Yeah, that's cool.
I just want to give other people more chances because it's a good question and it's really hard because people, again, are squishy, difficult things. Yes, Deb, dear.
I was curious if you had a sense of what percentage of drive-by means healthy, or if I don't know if you talked about that at the very beginning, and and what kinds of things you might look for. Like maybe there's a range. It would be like for smaller projects you might have less, or for bigger or more complex versus less complex or something.
I have no idea, and that's because my answer to most things all the time is, it depends. One of the people I spoke with ran a project that was specifically focused on helping new contributors do something. They had an enormous number of drive-thrus. Enormous. So for them, it might not be as important of a metric, right? So their percentage is going to be different. For something like, I know, P5P. Let's talk Perl. We just lost our pumpkin. I'm a Perl girl. I'm proud of it. Our pumpkin just moved on. He, after 5 years of being the leader of the project, of the Perl 5 project, he is handing over the baton to someone else. We don't know who yet. So, but for P5P, the Perl 5 porters mailing list, which is where all the core work happens, they have a really high number of drive-thrus for multiple reasons. For them, it might be interesting it would be actually the number, I don't know what a healthy number would be, but anything higher than what they have now, right? And maybe at some point as they're measuring, they'll see, okay, we've kind of plateaued, and we're doing great. Look at all this other benefit that we've received. That's the number which we would like to set it at. But it's like any other metric, right? You have to do some gauging, some benchmarking. What is important for us? What is not? What is high for us? What is not? All right, so I can't give an answer, but I can apparently talk about it for 3 minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. More questions, because we do have, we have less than 1 minute. Yes, Kurt?
I was going to say one thing I thought might have been forgotten is for drive-through contributors, you've got to get them to assign to sign their name to the license agreement before they disappear too.
Okay, so this is a CLA question, and I'm going to defer this one to Deb, who has a talk on licensing and everything like that, which is coming up.
Oh, I'm talking about patents in a while, but yeah, there's probably whole sessions you could do on CLAs, and whatever you do, it should just be consistent, and it should be transparent and obvious and easy to find. And you might do something like, by submitting a patch, we assume that you have looked at our CLA and agreed with it.
Right.
Is
Yep.
That's a quick
So it's a default.
Well, also, I did tell you to make a contributor how-to. That should be part of it. If this is something that you need, say, sorry, here's one of the tick boxes you have to tick for us to accept your patch, and that's one of them. Okay, and that's it. Thank you, everyone. Please do the evaluation.